Good afternoon, Chair. All committee members are present. Good afternoon. We're moving into the Rules Committee. Mr. Chair, all members are present.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved. Second.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, please let me know by saying aye.
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 Okay, thank you very much. All right, we have one item that's been on our agenda, and I would like to defer to the sponsor, if I could, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. We're just asking if this committee would be so kind to vote it out so it can be voted on this evening before all of council.
Okay, very, very good. All right, is there any discussion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
And we're looking for, we have a second? Okay, all in favor of bringing this before council, please let me know by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, very good. We will bring this before council this evening, and I do not believe we have any other items before us. Am I correct?
Mr. Chair, we do have an item number 2. Sir, yeah, this is the limits on non-cash monetary and in-kind contributions, and basically limits on cash contributions, etc. The campaign, also known as the campaign contribution legislation. I have requested of the clerk that we have a public hearing on October 3rd. So that's going to be advertised, and we'll have that public hearing on the 3rd, if that's okay with the committee here.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I missed that because one of my laptops is down. All right. Okay. We had some discussion on this. Anyone from a committee?
I guess the recommendation then would be to refer and advertise for a public hearing on October 3rd. That's the motion.
What was the date again on that, Mr. Fusco?
October 3rd.
Okay. Okay, so there's a motion to refer to October. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, excellent. I apologize for missing that. Now I believe that was our last order of business, and I will call the meeting to adjournment. Thank you so much.
Our next committee meeting of the day is the Public Service Committee. Those committee members are Mosley, Kamer, Holland, Lombardo, and McKittrick. And I believe all those committee members are present. Give everybody a few minutes to settle in here and we'll continue on.
Okay, if we could call public service to order. All committee members are present. Can I get a motion and approval of our previous meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second. Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have three pieces coming before us this afternoon. First piece is an ordinance determining to proceed with the improvement of East Wilworth Road between the termini of Interstate 77 and South Arlington Street, Triplet Boulevard between the termini of South Arlington Street and South Cyberlink Street, Maslin Road between the termini of Oaks Drive and East Waterloo Road, and George Washington Boulevard between the termini of East Waterloo Road and Triplet Boulevard by resurfacing and declaring an emergency. Mr. Luttle?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of committee. This is our last piece of this resurfacing legislation. We've brought to this piece before you in other legislation. This is ODOT run project. We will not, they will bid it, they will inspect it, but it is 4.2 miles of resurfacing inside of our city. Now that we've had the Assessment Equalization Board hearing and their report is attached to your UCR, we're ready to give the notice to proceed at this project.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Councilman Kamer?
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chris, can you give me us a timetable?
It won't start till spring.
Next year? Right?
Spring of
I
23.
mean, I understand.
Spring of 23. It's taken ODOT a long time to get all this done, and I understand, and we can do some patchwork out there on Wilbeth. I understand from the expressway up to Triplet is pretty bad, but we will maintain it till spring. But their schedule runs from July to July, and with their funding, we were trying to get this in for this year, but it won't start till spring, unfortunately.
Next spring. All right. Thanks.
Sorry for the bad news.
Thanks, Councilwoman.
Any other questions? Chris, what would be your pleasure?
Consent's fine.
Consent. Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is that a nay from you, Councilman Holland? Who said nay? Can you get a roll call, Michelle? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. Next piece, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for construction of the Rubber City Heritage Trail Project, Phase 1, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Little.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. This is the first phase of the Rubber City Heritage Trail. It will begin down by the old Goodyear World headquarters on 3rd Avenue. It will follow the old rail line. This section, or this phase, is probably one of the more expensive phases that we'll be doing. It will end near the intersection of Arlington and Market. So it will come up past it'll follow the rail yard and up by the new fire station number 2. The reason why this section is going to be a lot more expensive than the others, we're going to be using 2 old railroad bridges. So the tracks will have to be removed and new decks will have to be put on those. One is actually over the Little Cauga River. So this section, like I said, it's about 4,700 feet of new trail. And then eventually this will continue all the way through the city. Behind Dave's Market, it kind of meanders down through your ward, and then it goes down through Firestone Park, and eventually it will get the riders or the people all the way down to the trailhead of Wilbeth. But this section is only from 3rd Avenue up to Market and Exchange. Market and Arlington.
So 3rd Avenue, I'm trying to get a visual.
Well, if you're like where Kelly and 3rd down in that area.
Okay.
Yes.
And so when you say going over one of the rail bridges, the only bridge I can think of is the one that's over on, is that Case Avenue? That one right there?
Well, there's one over the river, and then there's the other one is over River Street and Factory, those tracks there.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Any question from council members? Councilwoman Connor?
Thank you, Councilwoman. I'd like to ask to be added to this piece.
Absolutely. What would be, Councilman Fosco?
Yeah, thank you. And I, too, would like my name added. Just in that this is the first phase. We've been working on this for 5 years, I believe, maybe 6 or so, linking Firestone and Goodyear. and hence the name Rubber City Heritage Corridor. As a matter of fact, it'll be going into Ellett Ward 6, and it will be a nice link in terms of our downtown area. This is the first phase, and I just wanted to ask, what's the timing on this? Are we looking at
We
possibly next year?
Sir, we hope to bid it yet this year and start construction as soon as the weather breaks.
That's outstanding, yeah. And a portion of this, if I recall correctly, is the bridge that you can see from the expressway. That's on the back of what used to be the Goodyear World headquarters.
That's correct.
Yeah, and there's going to be some lighting on there as well. So it'll be visible from the expressway too. So it's going to take a long time, as these projects do take a long time, especially whenever they're done in phases, and eventually we're going to see, the east side and the south side linking. So it's a great project, and I appreciate the mayor and his staff and support of putting this together. It'll be great to see it take off.
What's your pleasure, Chris?
Consent is fine.
Okay, can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. My final piece is an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to file an application for, and if awarded, accept and expend grant funding from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Division of Forestry, Urban Canopy Restoration Grant Program, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Ludlow?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of committee. Unfortunately, Melinda Samples, our grant writer, she can't attend today. She found this grant, and as you know, we've been heavily investing in street trees and increasing our canopy through our AWR program. We currently spend about $500,000 a year in reforesting the city of Akron. So this was a match. We will be able to obtain $25,000. So we'll use part of our current budget to show that we will put in $25,000, and it will be for street trees. This application is due next month, October 14th. Consent is fine on this, but basically, we're not extending any more of the budget. We're just going to use our existing budget to show that match to get this $25,000.
Okay. Ms. Williams, do you have something to add to that?
No, Chris and I got the same email from Melinda.
Okay, okay. Can I get a motion for suspension of the rules with a favorable report?
I'll make that. Second.
A motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. We have nothing else coming before us, so we are adjourned.
Our next committee meeting of the day is the Public Safety Committee meeting. Those committee members are Kamer, Mosley, Lombardo, Malik, and McKittrick. All members are present. Give everyone a few minutes and we'll begin.
I'd like to go ahead and call the public safety meeting to order. All members are present. Last time we held a meeting was July 25th, and we do need to approve those minutes, please.
Motion for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. We do have 4 pieces in front of us today. Our first piece is offered by Mayor Horrigan. It's an ordinance 2022 amending and or supplementing Title III, Chapter 31, and enacting Article 3, Citizen Oversight of Police, including Sections 31.50, definitions 31.51, Citizen Oversight Board, 31.52, Powers and Duties of Citizen Oversight Board, and 31.53, Office of Inspector General of the Akron Codified Ordinances in order to provide independent citizen review and local policing policies and procedures of the City of Akron Police Department declare emergency. And I do see we have Mayor Horgan in front of us today.
Afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have before you is a proposal on an ordinance which we've talked about for quite a bit, about creating a Citizens Oversight Board for the City of Akron. You can read through the whereas as far as, obviously been working on this for a considerable number of months. I know Emily and Brian and Tamika have met a number of times with various cities across the country and even across Ohio to get best practices. I believed early on and have been committed to a Citizens Oversight Board even through the new chief's interviews from a year ago, and that was one of the key questions that he had agreed to and said these are absolutely best practice across the country. And if you look at a number of those things, and I know it seems like it's a competing with the charter amendment, and if you look at some of the what we think are problematic issues with the charter amendment as it conflicts with the collective bargaining agreement, our goal was always to get this up and running by this year, 2022, kind of work out some of the kinks, get the board seated, get the Inspector General hired. And I'm not stuck on nomenclature, but these are some of the words that I know Columbus has used on that part of it too, on their job description. And then take this to the ballot initiative in November of 2023. And I said this Saturday and I said this last week, I completely respect the process of going out to gather signatures, change the charter. It's not undifficult. In fact, it's very difficult to change the charter, but also becomes very permanent. And I think as we have highlighted throughout a number of ways to around the charter amendment, they got enough signatures and it is going to go to the ballot. Like I said, I respect that process and people going out to get the signatures, but there are some issues with it when it comes to that. And so you can kind of read through this. I know Emily and Brian have done a tremendous amount of research about best practices, about what works. None of these have been up and running for decades, so where you can point back to a long history of success. Many of them were probably under 4 or 5 years old. Maybe Cincinnati has the longest one. Many of them are part of consent decrees, which Akron is not under. And so this was the framework that we wanted to put forward, to put to council for your consideration. More than happy to take any questions from committee members and go from there. And I might add, having gone through that process of changing the charter and getting signatures, and like I said, not being an easy process to do, certainly respect the people, you know, that went out and got the signatures. That is a process that it's hard. You've got to gather signatures, get them verified, and then kind of go from there and then go make your case. But now it's up to the Akron voters to be able to say, listen, we want this or we don't. We have been committed to this process and committed to a Citizens Oversight Board for a number of months, going back from the work that council did on re-examining public safety and the Racial Equity and Social Justice Task Force. So this is the end product of that, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. Before we ask the committee any questions or comments, I'd like to make a couple comments. I appreciate you bringing this in. I highlighted a few things that really stand out to me where I can be in favor of this. And what I like is what you put in here is the 11 members, basically one from each ward. So you're being very transparent and you're not leaving a ward out per se, so I appreciate that. The other thing that stands out is under C, qualifications. I really like the 40 hours of the ride-alongs within the 1 year of taking office for these citizens. I really think that's very important, not just for the police department, but for our community, that they'll be making decisions. So I just wanted to point that out, and then I do see where I highlighted that 6 members will be appointed by you, the mayor, and 5 depending on our consent of council. So those are the highlights, and I don't have no questions, but I really like that being put in here, and I appreciate you bringing this to us, and I believe this is something I definitely can support, so I appreciate that. So I'll take any questions from committee members of public safety first, and then we'll go on. I do see Councilwoman Mosley, her hand's up, please.
Thank you, Councilman Cameron. Mic on. I too want to highlight some of the sections that Councilman Kamer brought forth. 31.51. C, the 40 hours of ride-along, I've been very open about. I just struggle with that. Not to not do them, they absolutely should do them, but I would like to see that broken down where they spend some time with fire and EMS, for them to spend some time over in the 911 system. I think it's important for them to see every aspect of what goes on with those services. So maybe breaking that in half, maybe 20 hours with ride-alongs, and then breaking the rest up between fire and 911. I like the 11 members coming from each ward. I think that's very important. I do struggle with the mayor being able to have the majority of that, but just one extra person, so.
With a number of things that have a number of commissions, 5 are appointed by city council also with your consent. Like I said, it is consistent with the charter and the application of that too. And I don't think that's a bad idea as far as getting a sense, at least from dispatch, what the information that they get to send somebody on a call. Sometimes, and I'm not the police officer in the room, but it's very limited sometimes, and sometimes it's not really highly accurate, but to see the process that they go through. From a mental side too, okay, this is what I've got to discern, this is what I'm going to put out to tell somebody to go to a call, and that could be from either fire or police, because oftentimes it's a co-response. It's a co-response, and sometimes the police are there first before fire, so I don't think that's a bad idea as far as the requirement goes. I think even looking at spreading it out over a number of months or a year or two, it's not like you have to get it in the first couple of weeks. It's a process like any certification process. You get a certain amount of time to do it. I think that's a very valuable idea.
Right. And then I don't think this would come from your side, but just on our council side, when it says those 5 members being appointed by the council and approved by council, that part I really would want all of council to have a part in. Sometimes we get to appoint in committees and we pick certain people who review applications. We do it whenever we have someone coming in, like if we're doing an appointment to a vacancy. I think all of council should have a say in the applications. We look at them and say, here, these are 2 people that we think that we like from our ward, and then we take it from there. But I just don't want it to be spoon-fed to us, so to say. I think we all should have a say in who those members are, especially when they're coming from our wards. So that's something that I think that we all should really consider going forward. I just don't want us to get in a point where now we have competing pieces. That concerns me. So now we're going to have a charter amendment, if it passes. The ordinance is here, which is not a bad idea if the charter doesn't pass. So now we have something to fall back on. But if the charter passes and we have an ordinance, how do we marry those 2 together is my concern, without it feeling like we just told all of these people who worked so hard to get signatures, thanks, but we're going to roll with our piece and not yours.
Yeah,
although the charter does trump the ordinance, but how do we marry the 2?
Yeah, and I've been open and transparent about not supporting the charter amendment, and parts of the language, parts of it I think marry up pretty good. There are other parts that I think are problematic, especially when it comes to the collective bargaining agreement. To me, I think that's absolutely my responsibility as mayor is to look at those, and I don't agree with the direction that we're going. I've likened it to a roundabout, and I know it's simple, but we're going to get to the same place. We may not get everything that we all want, but I think, you know, at the end of the day, we're going to have a Citizens Review Board or Citizens Oversight Committee. How that is structured, of whether the voters say, yes, we do agree with all of this, but I think it is my responsibility as the mayor to say, listen, I don't agree with it, and I've told everybody I don't agree with certain provisions of it, which is the impetus for this, to be able to say we can get it moving forward and we can get it seated, you know, fairly quickly with the board members on there. And so it's not an underhanded process. It's not anything. I've been very open and transparent about the support of the entire process as opposed to very individual pieces of it that I think are problematic for the city, which is what I think I have to do when it looks to coming to change the charter and to do that. Like I said, and I'll let either Emily or Brian answer this. I don't know if it's called severability, but I'll let you answer that part.
And then really my last part, and then you can answer, is I noticed where there's a component in here where we're creating positions. and I touched on this with Emily, is where does that leave Phil Young? Because it seems like we're creating positions that almost supersede or mirror what he's there to do. So how do we work that out?
I think I responded to this question in your email, Councilwoman, but so the task force had recommended that an oversight board also oversee an auditor or inspector general. In our ordinance, obviously an inspector general. And the purpose of doing that, right, is to give them control over who that person is. We use the term inspector general for the purpose of combining these two models of both audit and review. So review allows us to see more into systemic underreported issues, whereas audit is much more complaint driven. And we wanted to be honest to that and not just say it's an auditor. It's more than that. There's a lot of community engagement as well. So we were careful to make sure that the Inspector General job description does not preclude Mr. Young from being eligible, and we fully expect that he would apply. But we do want to acknowledge that a citizen oversight board that's instated does have that power to hire and oversee the Inspector General.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Oh,
Councilwoman, Brian Angeloni's going to answer your charter amendment question.
Sorry. Yeah, I'll go back to a couple of things, actually. So in terms of the application process, you mentioned having involvement in that. There's nothing in this framework that really dictates that application process specifically, so there would be no reason in my mind why this would preclude council having an active role in that process in some way. So just to be clear, I don't think that this speaks to that. Secondly, you talked about the appointment authority of members of the board and council not having a majority. Council has the ability to, at least in part, appoint all of the members of the board. So even the six that are nominated by the mayor's office, a majority of council would have to approve those members as well. So you would have a say in every member of the board. So back to the compatibility question, then I think the problem with it is it's very speculative at this point as to how this is going to play out. We don't know if a charter amendment is going to pass. Maybe it does. And if it does, I think the answer, as you point out, is pretty simple. If there is a directly conflicting provision, the charter amendment is going to supersede any ordinance. Now, the ordinance itself, as you guys know, it can be amended. It can be changed. If there are incompatible provisions, that could be altered. That could be voted upon by the body. Another possibility is that the charter amendment, for one reason or another, is held up in litigation. Perhaps there's a lawsuit immediately filed by the union. We don't know what's going to happen. That could put in place a stay. For example, if the union filed and grieved this and filed a case, it could be locked up in litigation and there could be an injunction in place. Again, we really don't know. And in the absence of the charter amendment taking effect, I think that the provisions of the ordinance would stay. You'd be steady. So that's all to say. I'm going to go back and give the lawyer answer, which is it's speculative at this point. We don't know. But I can see where the two could certainly coexist.
thank you, I appreciate that. I do see Councilman Lombardo's hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have probably a mixture of comments and a question here, if I can hear myself think with what's going on outside. But anyhow, looking over the powers and the duties of the board, these people are going to work. They're going to work, and I'm sure they're going to know that before they apply. They're to get $100 per meeting. It says no more than $1,200 once a month. With all their duties, I mean, that just seems kind of light to me. And I'm not just, referring back to just for $100 we're going to do this, but because I'm sure they're going to do it because their heart's in it, not because of the financial windfall that they may get. But, so anyhow, that was more or less a comment that these people are going to work. But going further with the, it's the hiring of the, why are my pages out of order? The Inspector General, I guess, and in those other positions. Yeah. Are those more or less a salaried position then?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And we don't have any type of salary, stated here, but, okay, I was just wondering that. All right, thank you.
Just on your comment on the boards and commission, we have a number of them that, we did compensate. When Margot and I put together, or President Somerville and I put together the Racial Equity and Social Justice Task Force with council, there was compensation. Also, the Akron Civil Rights Commission. There are a number of boards and commission. You're right. It's not a huge amount, and it's not necessarily for financial gain, but there's a number of those boards and commissions that put in a significant amount of work, and part of it is giving back to the city too, on that way too. But I think it was important to compensate board members on that way to do it. I think it shows a measure of I think respect, and there's another word I'm looking for. We thought it was important, as it's going to become a very important committee.
But these positions, the Inspector General, Assistant Inspector General, General Administrative Specialist, they're not in the city's budget right now, the payroll, right? Because you have to create these positions.
There are actually in there. The Inspector General is the position, the auditor position currently occupied by Phil Young.
Okay.
There is an admin position currently already budgeted. We are in the process of trying to hire somebody for that position. There was an offer made originally. The person found a different job, so it's like everybody else. There's labor shortages.
Okay.
But interviews are still underway for that admin position. It's that second one, the deputy position, that is not currently filled, not currently an opportunity. It's something we're taking a look at and could add to the budget opportunity here.
For 23. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilman Malik, then Madam President after him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. There have been a lot of discussions about this, going back to our Reimagining Public Safety discussions, the Racial Equity and Social Justice Task Force, and really, for more than a decade before that, since the auditor position was created. And clearly there's been a lot of work put into this, and I really appreciate that. A couple of points, clearly there is a difference of opinion as to whether a charter amendment is the appropriate thing to do at this juncture, right? But there is a lot of consensus. I think three of the things that we listed as concerns from Reimagining Public Safety around police oversight were staffing, access to information, and independence. And staffing, there are three members here, and I think that will be helpful to have the deputy role and have institutional memory. Having access, I think, is clearly defined here. And then independence, clearly having this person the staff be selected by the board is positive. I do question having the mayor's consent for both the hiring and the removal. But then I think my only final concern is really mirroring Councilwoman Mosley's, right? There is a proposal that is on the ballot for November. Having a separate proposal that we as council move forward with now, before that, does run the risk of confusing voters and confusing the public. And then after that, there is some concern. I don't think it is insurmountable. In the charter amendment language, they're similar to the body cam amendment. There needs to be implementing legislation. And so if it passes and this passes, the two will have to be reconciled in some way. But even if this doesn't pass and the other proposal does, there will still need to be further legislation. So that is a concern that I have on moving forward with this before November. But at the same time, a lot of this is speculative. We don't know how this will all play out. So appreciate bringing all of this before us.
Let me comment on two things. One, I absolutely in support of a charter amendment. The timing to me has always been questionable in this particular one, just because, and I've remained committed to bringing a charter amendment in November of 2023. To me, I think it's a little bit of a stretch to say this goes back a decade. I think the role of auditor has evolved over the last 10 years into more of a citizen's oversight, even across the community, not only in Akron, but I think across the country, where you've seen best practices instituting these. And I've said this, about the signature gathering, and our aim is true. It's not meant to be confusing or to say, hey, listen, you guys should do this or this. These are the concerns. I think we've laid them out, pretty consistently over the last, 35 or 40 days to say this is the concerns of what I have with the amendment, but it's not to take away from the process of this is how they do it, but this we think is a better framework to move forward. So, thanks.
Go ahead.
Just one point. I didn't mean to imply that anything other than to say that the discussions about police oversight clearly predate 2020. I don't want them to say they began when I started on council. Many people have been discussing this for many years, and I just want to respect that. So that was my point.
Thank you. Madam President.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank Emily, Brian, Mayor, just your whole team. I know that you guys have been working really, really hard on this issue. I'm going to be very honest. At the very beginning, the onset, I was against an ordinance, didn't even want to talk about an ordinance because I know how important the Citizens Review Board is and how the process should be independent and how it should be placed on the charter. The reality of it is that we do have a charter amendment that is in the works, which is great. That's wonderful. The people have spoken. But the reality of it is it's this body, Akron City Council, who will be given the responsibility to draft the ordinance. And so we already know that the ballot language and it is not perfect. We know that there are some flaws, and we know that there might be some complications for us to immediately put a Citizens Review Board in place. And so we do have some concerns that maybe the charter amendment will not meet the people's expectation in a timely way. And so that is why I am now open to looking at an ordinance, another vehicle that can still get us to the place in which we need to be, and a place in which maybe we can get there a little bit faster in case we do have some issues legally that we might not be able to navigate. So I just want to say I want to thank the mayor for being open to considering and committing to make sure that this too, the ordinance will be on the charter in 2023. The thing I like about that is it gives us a year's time to really work out the kinks and to continue to look at best practices, but most importantly to engage the public, right? And educate them on this issue so that come next year they are informed and they have a better understanding in terms of what the Citizens Review Board looks like, and they have an opportunity to have some input. I also want to thank Mayor Horgan for being open to giving council 5 appointments. Thank you for hearing me on that. And so we're also excited about that. I know Councilwoman Mosley, you mentioned something about how that would happen, what that would look like. I kind of envisioned that we would create a committee, right? Again, we are ward council people, at-large council people. We are often closest to the people, right? So I'm assuming that applications would come to us, we'd create a committee, we review those applications, and we would decide on who our 5 appointments would be, okay? So again, I just want to thank you for all of your hard work, and again, I do see that this is another option, another vehicle that can get us to where we need to be, and that's a place of citizens review. And I think the other thing is important, and Mayor, you said this, we're looking and we're talking about what all these other cities are doing, and these other cities have implemented citizens review boards under consent decree, right? But here we are not under consent decree, right? So I would think it really speaks to our leadership, and how committed we really and truly are to accountability and transparency and really making that happen in the city. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to go to Councilman Fusco, and then I'll head over to the folks that are on Zoom.
Thank you, Chairman Kamer. Just wanted to thank all those folks with all the discussions that we've had for years and years and years. A lot in terms of even before the racial equity task force before the comments that we had here in council about it. There was discussions out in the community, ward meetings, so many previously. The thing of it is, though, is I believe that I like this method because we are going to have some lived and learned experiences, I believe, over the next year or so. And it seems as though a best practice is in fact to go through an ordinance period first and live and learn from those experiences and then place it in the charter itself. And so that we can have a high degree of confidence that it would hold up and stay in bounds legally. The other piece that I think is real important that the oversight board, citizen oversight board do, you know, and it's in here, but I would like to see them kind of focus on, and we've talked about that in our committees here at council, and that is putting out the good news about what is done by our Akron police force. All too often, we never hear that, except for at the ward meetings, where those relationships are built. Every ward meeting, there is a police officer there, at least one, if not two, and relationships are built, and good news is shared. Oftentimes, though, it doesn't meet the entire public. The entire public is not aware of all the good things that's done by our police department, and I understand this is oversight and their mission is a little different, but I would like to see some of that, at least a little piece of it, be part of the discussion so that we can get that information out. We've talked about doing that here in council perhaps one day, but thank you for allowing me my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. I appreciate those comments. I'll go to folks that are on Zoom. I did see Councilwoman Baylor's hand up first, then Amobian, then Holland. So I'll go to Councilwoman Amobian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate all the discussion and comments that have been made. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. First, I want to recognize the fact that I hate that we're doing this in terms of we're having one ordinance and then there's the charter amendment that's scheduled to be on the ballot in November. Because I think an offer was made to the mayor and his cabinet, and particularly to the mayor, to join forces. Because at the end of the day, we want the same thing. We want a safe Akron for all of our citizens and for the police department. And I think that is what is so critical about this, is that we want to join forces so that we can have a safe city. And that is the purpose of both of these, I hope. And from my perspective, having individuals who are not appointed by the mayor, who are totally taken out of any political hands and asking people to voluntarily submit an application and interest in being a part of the oversight committee, I think that's a real critical piece, because we've heard from so many people that they just don't trust the political arena enough to do that. The other thing that's important is that the devil is in the details. We looked at the charter amendment. We know that wasn't perfect. This is not perfect, that the mayor is proposing either. But as we develop how the system is going to work if this amendment passes, is that there are so many things that we can put in the details of how we want to implement the program that could be very critical and viable. Because I think, again, we have known for a long time that our police auditor situation has not worked, and we have not done anything to correct that. And that's the problem that we've had. And that's why people don't trust that we can do this, is that we have known that they've been understaffed, underfunded, and there was really no teeth and leverage that they had to get the kind of information and materials from the police department to do a thorough review of any of these acts or infractions. So everything about this process needs to be independent of us. After we go through the application process and get those individuals on this committee, then it needs to be independent of all of us so that people can trust the process. And that is what the problem is now. They don't trust that we can independently evaluate, study, or whatever what happened to accept anything that we say. And we have waited too long, folks, to do this. And unfortunately, now we have two pieces of legislation. You know, a charter amendment, now the mayor's bringing in something that will eventually lead to a charter amendment. I'm not really sure what the delay was all about when you put that in place. And I'm not really sure what we can really learn in a few months, because you probably won't have a full year to implement this or to do anything that's going to give us really any real true results. So my real concern and the frustration that I feel is that now we want to confuse the public. But I think those individuals who have been watching this and observing this for all these years are going to come in with the concerns that I expressed, that they don't trust us. They don't trust us to do this as part of our political system. They want it totally independent, and I understand why. The other thing is, why haven't we done anything to strengthen our police auditor's position? You know, and that becomes one question. Then another question we're talking about, you know, we can pay people if we want to. You know, $1,200 for the time. It's not really a payment. It's just a stipend or a token of appreciation, I guess, because it really doesn't amount to much. Because if the individuals that were served on this oversight committee will have to do a lot of work. I hope whoever is there know that this is very serious work that has to be reported out to the public for them to appreciate and accept whatever the findings are that we have. But I hate that we're coming in with two different pieces, and I'm not really sure why the mayor couldn't join forces with the citizens. I mean, we had over 7,000 citizens who signed the petitions. I know that, you know, less than 4,000 were valid in terms of going through the Board of Elections process. But still, that's a lot of folks who took the time to sign this to say we want an overview of what's going on, some oversight that's independent of the political arena. And even today, we still don't have officers turning on their body-worn cameras. For the life of me, I don't understand that. And we really have to make this a mandatory. And I realize that the adrenaline is going when they get to these sites, and they, you know, may forget, but practice makes perfect. And the more you turn them on, the more you get into the habit of whenever you leave your cruiser, that you would have your body-worn camera on. It doesn't make sense to me.
Excuse me, Councilwoman.
I'm just really concerned about what we're doing. I will not be approving this because I believe in what we have that's going to be on the ballot. And I believe once it's passed, the devil's in the details of how we develop and frame the program. So thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I appreciate the comments. Councilwoman Holland?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Many of my colleagues have already made some of the points that I'd like to make about this, but I think that perhaps for the purpose of the public, the most important thing about this proposed ordinance comes in paragraph 8 of the predicate recitals, which contains a commitment that this ordinance, if passed, will result in a charter amendment that will be put on the ballot in November of 2023. One of the things that I think merits consideration and passage of this ordinance is that this offers a solution that is immediate and that appears on its face to offer some assurances about some of the concerns about preemption by federal labor law and other concerns that have still not fully been addressed in terms of what it means to amend our city charter for the important purpose of modernizing our city and addressing a matter that is not just something that arose this year, but according to colleagues and historians, really has been a very, very long time coming, as much as 50 years, maybe more. I think that it is important that we recognize that the dual paths of pursuing this necessary change are not in competition or conflict, but that they lead to the same desired outcome. How they go about it, slightly different. One has the advantage of an immediate referendum to voters, and one has the advantage of an immediate creation of a system under which there will be the advantage of lived experience, lived information that can inform a ballot initiative that is promised on the face of the legislation in November of 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Holland. Councilwoman Mosley, then I'll go back to Freeman.
Thank you. Just two final questions. So on the Inspector General position, is there already a requirement as to that position? Has something already been formulated as to what that job entails?
There's a job description, and we had sent that along with the draft ordinance some weeks ago. But it's also important to acknowledge that the duties of the board are essentially, it can be delegated to the person who's salaried, right? So a lot of the board's duties will likely be done by the Inspector General. Does that make sense?
Okay, so I was reading the one part in here, I know it's in 3153, where the board can remove the inspector by 7 votes, and then what? They reappoint someone, or do we go back to square one where we have to hire someone again? I think that sort of kind of confuses me a little bit as to how does that happen if they remove the person that's there?
Well, the board has oversight of the Inspector General, so they're the hiring and removal.
I got that part.
Yeah, right.
But after they remove them,
Right. No, they'd have to rehire, yeah.
And then they rehire someone. It doesn't go back through the same process.
Well, Councilwoman, I can speak to that.
Okay,
actually, in Section C, so basically the way that it's set up, the board is charged under the ordinance to actually meet immediately. If they were to remove the Inspector General, they're to meet immediately to convene and engage in a new selection process consistent with the selection process that's outlined in Section B of 3152. So 3152B governs that process. So they have to comply with that if they remove.
I think is your question whether anything would be going on if they remove the Inspector General?
Right,
I think it
like
belies
how-
the importance of the deputy on that end too,
Okay.
depending on the amount of work. And certainly these job responsibilities, they can evolve. And that's the whole point. I mean, there's a number of positions. I'll take the position of firefighter because I'm sure it's evolved since you started back to now, where it's just different. They can evolve to say, okay, now they're going to do this. I think that's a strength of it too. So if you see a general job description, what about this? Certainly that input, either public counsel, all over, kind of helps to be able to help that position evolve. If somebody moved away, obviously we want the work of the board to go forward, but they're going to have to go through that process to get somebody in place. But I think it belies the importance of the deputy.
So now I have even more questions. So it says in here that the Human Resources Department will conduct interviews of the candidate for that position?
Go ahead. I know that's the way it is written. It seems like it's the way it's written, but to me, if the hiring authority is with the board, to me, they would be doing the interview on that process too.
Yeah,
I think the structure of how to go through, here's how you apply online, just the framework, the buttons to click, this is what you have to do, you go through that process. HR gives the candidates to the board and says, here are your list of candidates that met these qualifications, your selection. Now it's up to you and your authority, not HR's authority and not mine.
I definitely would like to see that changed in there because it seems as if HR is going to be the person to say, hey, here's your person, this is your, and would Phil Young have to interview for a position like this, even though he's the auditor? So clearly, this means the auditor's position would almost be moot. So now he would have to interview for this position with the board or with HR?
With the board. HR just serves as the administrative function. As council, today, you're advertising for a position. We all use HR to advertise for that position, but council would make the decision on that particular hire. HR would do the administrative function. They do the posting. They would make sure people at least meet the minimum qualifications to go to that next level to be considered. So it's really just the administrative function like they do for all other departments, including council, for hiring.
Right, it's a benefit that you're able to use human resources as a structure for the board.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if we could relay that in here, I would feel a lot more comfortable. And also, if possible, this would just make amendments all over the place, but I just want to make sure I put this on record. I would really like to see the ride-alongs decrease to 20 hours and fire 10 hours and 911 10 hours, because it's great that they're going to do the ride-alongs. But I think someone on a board should have to see the whole scope of those services, like I said in the beginning. I respect the 40 hours, but I just think when you ignore the other two components of safety services, I think it's only giving them the preview of what the officers are facing, not what the fire, EMS, and what 911 is facing.
Aren't those just recommendations? They're not requirements
It's
at
strive
this point.
to achieve.
Yeah, the language is
strong-
strive to achieve 40 hours.
Okay.
And we are not asking for passage today.
Thank
If you have
you.
questions, concerns, please make sure you're sending those to us. Definitely have conversations with your colleagues. We definitely would like any feedback, take a look at that. Brian and Emily have done a tremendous amount of research, can kind of guide us where there has been issues in the past. Emily has uncovered that more than 62% of civilian oversight boards have had trouble and have had to go back to rewrite legislation.
Right.
So that's why we're asking, not only for consideration here, but consideration before we go forward with the charter amendment next year, so we can really work out those issues and learn from a lot of other jurisdictions where they have had problems.
Right. And so, final, because this ordinance is called the Citizens Oversight Committee, and then we have the Citizens Review Board, long-term, say they both pass. So yours would come in after this one passes, then you bring in one. Does your charter amendment now trump the one that's there?
To me, it's difficult. I don't want to speculate. I don't want to speculate to say. No, that's okay. I don't want to speculate as to the prospects of the ordinance or the prospects of the charter amendment. It's, I have there's 4 cards in our hand. You know what I mean? Got to see where it all ends up at some particular point, and then make a decision from there. So, but I'll reiterate again, committed to taking this to the charter, in November of 2023 in support of this, because I'd like some framework and some experience or lived experience, so we don't go to that 62% to make sure that it is successful in taking it back to the charter in November 23. Not making any predictions on anything. This is our proposal. You guys can, make suggestions and say, listen, we want to change this to 20 and 10 and 10. Okay, I have no problem. That to me, the nomenclature is not a big issue either on that stuff. This is the proposal of which I am asking council to consider, and then and I would ask you to consider favorably. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Freeman?
Yeah, I did not have my hand up, but I would like to offer a comment. I had a board meeting last week, and some folks, actually I did not bring this up, but some folks brought up the whole idea of police oversight like this to me, and the folks that talk to me, they'll never come downtown. I doubt if they're even watching this online today, but there is, amongst some of my constituents, there is a fear of, if this does go through, of making sure that we do not have people that are on an oversight board that are operating from a point of adverse feelings to the police to begin with. So, you know, whether this passes, whether the whether our citizen-based referendum passes, I really think it's going to be important that we carefully select individuals that serve. And like I say, the folks that express this to me have probably never had a parking ticket. They're just easygoing, law-abiding folks. But there are concerns out there from some of our citizens we may never hear from. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I'd like to make a comment before I call on anyone else. I'm okay with you having 6 appointments because they all come here before us, and we make that final decision. So I'm totally fine with that. And over the years, I think every year you come here with possible appointments all the time for different boards throughout the whole city. And we make that final decision. So I just wanted to put that on record that I'm okay with that because we make the final decision. And I like Madam President's ideal too about us forming a small committee to go through that selection process for us. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Councilwoman Amobian, and then Neil.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. I don't know if this was answered. I didn't hear it. The Inspector General would be hired by whom?
The board. The board.
I couldn't hear you.
The board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate a lot of the comments that were shared. My concern is that many times I've heard us talk about how we want to be a collaborative, inclusive, transparent government. And the fact that we have 2 pieces coming in just shows the challenge that we have. And I can point to many examples of legislation that has been passed, or things in the charter that are stated that when it is not of the opinion or in the best interest of the governing, leading body on council or the administration, we find ways to usurp it. Some of you have mentioned it. I mean, the citizens wanted a police audit, but we found ways to neuter that position. The bottom line, the thing that we have a challenge with is just trust. You know, and you know, one of my things, I've talked to colleagues in other communities, and one thing that none of them have done, and we haven't done either. I had a conversation with Clay Cozart. We're up here talking about what we're going to do with the police, about the police. Have we included them in the discussion? That was one of Chief Ball's frustrations. Talk about the police, talk at the police, but we never talk with them. Folks, things aren't going to change just because we write a piece of legislation. And so my concern is, I've lived long enough in this city, I've been down this road before. I appreciate the efforts of the citizens, but we, the administration and council, have the opportunity to set that example of what we mean when we say collaborative, inclusive, transparent. And we've missed that opportunity, and we know we've missed it because we've got 2 competing pieces. So, I understand the part about the ordinance, working out the bugs. But the reason why the citizens don't want to wait is because of the lack of trust. And then whatever we do, I mean, we've got to stop talking forming legislative, forming policy that impacts people's lives, and those folks not be a part of the process. So, You know, I'm exhausted, for lack of a better term. I'm exhausted because I know the energy that everyone has put into it. But my fear is that, you know, they say if you do the same thing and expect different results, that's a form of insanity. But we could go right back to when we had talking about the primary, moving the primary. Now, if we follow that example, there was a citizens initiative, or there was an initiative supported by, you know, the administration, but that initiative got the citizens' signatures. And this council preempted a legislation that was coming in from council because we said the citizens had spoken. You know, if precedent's been set, maybe we should honor the citizens with the understanding that since neither one of these are perfect, we can say we've honored their request, but know that we've got to truly be transparent, inclusive, and collaborate with all parties, especially those who were forming this legislation that's going to impact their lives, to do what's best on behalf of the whole city. Because here's the thing, maybe I read the article wrong, all of us can do all this work. But if the police union doesn't want to move, this thing isn't going to move. So let's really, truly, truly, truly be about being inclusive, being transparent, being collaborative, and work together. That's my only ask. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Fusco.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. Excuse me. I know many of us on Akron City Council talk to the police department on a routine basis. I know some of us have had discussions with the Mr. Cozart in reference to just this. Some of us have done that, taken the time to do that. Invite my colleagues to have more discussions with the police. I talk to them all the time. In terms of the body-worn cameras, go out and learn why it is that oftentimes it's not captured. Akron is a leader in the country, one of the first ones in the country to have body-worn cameras. And we're followed by many cities out there to learn what the best practices are. No, it's not perfect. It's not going to capture everything all the time, but I would say Akron's pretty darn good at that. But there's always room for improvement, no question. And in terms of the, you know, I don't believe anyone said that neither one of these are perfect. I don't think anyone said that neither of them are perfect. However, though, I do believe that one is more likely to be upheld in court if it goes there. If it goes there. And that's the, I don't think there was any, no one's happy about two separate pieces occurring at the same time. I know the mayor's office, January, February, they were talking about this in earnest, okay? Way back then, that was discussed. In terms of the ordinance versus the charter, and obviously that's been a big part of our discussion here today, the charter is harder, as it should be. It should be harder. There's no question it should be. But the thing of it is again, we've said time and time again, we are going to go through this via ordinance with a commitment to bring through something on the ballot after 15, 14 months of learned and lived experience. There's a good reason why the charter is harder. But the ordinance will give us that time frame in order to get it closer to what we can all agree upon. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilwoman Connor.
I just want to thank everyone for their hard work on this. And for me, since I've been down here, I've heard the word equity at least 5,000 times, and I appreciate a representative from each ward to present that equity for each ward, to have a
Thank you, Councilwoman. All right, Councilwoman Mosley.
Just a quick statement. You know, we've talked about in this community installing a Citizens Review Board for 15 years. And the reason why I know it's been 15 years because it first came up when Demetrius Benson was killed up on North Hill. And I know that because that's my son-in-law's little brother. I think we can't keep waiting for something to happen for us to bring it up. And I hope that we all collectively, all 13 of us, can see through our own personalities and maybe agendas to do the right thing, because we have to. Our residents are requiring it of us. They're demanding it of us. And if that means we have to put a piece together that encompasses both pieces, as long as we do it and get it right, I think that's what matters and that's what counts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any final words from the mayor?
Sure. I would dispute a couple of notions, and I don't want to go back and forth because I think Mr. Neal made some good points around trust to do that, and in the collaborative process. But that doesn't mean we always agree with the process that goes on. And to me, I think that is good public policy. There does need to be a debate about back and forth. We all want, and I would echo Councilwoman Holland's sentiments when she says she doesn't think that they're competing. And I think people may be confused about this, but I think it is an absolute responsibility of the mayor's office to say, listen, this is what I think about this. And I've been open and transparent about the thoughts around the charter amendment. Their aim is true also. We are going to get this done. We are going to get this done. This collective body in the mayor's office is going to get this done because it's been demanded for so long. I think this is the best process going forward. Because, you know, government sometimes they do move way too slow. I get it. I'm as frustrated as everybody else. Maybe not as frustrated as everybody else, but we are going to get this done. This is just what I propose to do. It is up to this body to debate it and hopefully vote favorably and kind of go from there. The goal was never to confuse citizens about what is next and what is coming. There are, and I've highlighted and I've echoed the sentiments about that. I appreciate the forum. And like I said, I think this is a way good public policy does get done. It really does. You've had a lot of input and has been transparent. Collaboration doesn't necessarily mean that we will agree, but we do want to get to the end goal. And I think that is the establishment of the Citizens Oversight Board. So thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go ahead and make the motion for time.
Second.
All in favor for time?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Moving on to our other pieces. Our next ordinance, 2022, authorizing the mayor or his designee to apply for and, if awarded, accept and expend the FY 2022-2023 Quick Response Team, other known as QRT, grant funding from the Ohio Attorney General's Office Law Enforcement Division Program, and declare an emergency. And I do see we have Chief of Staff with us and Captain McCosey.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for the time. This is to accept a grant from the Attorney General's Office to continue our QRT program, which is our outreach for overdoses with opioids, which we've been doing for several years. This will allow us to continue that program. It is a collaborative program that we do with the Akron Fire Department as well as Summit County Public Health to do this outreach for those that are overdose victims, go out to their houses, check on them, offer services, and educate not only that person but also their family, providing Narcan kits, providing CPR training and things of that nature. So we would like to continue that program. We believe the grant will be in the neighborhood of $50,000 to allow us to continue that program for the next 12 months.
Thank you, Captain. Is this the same amount that we've received before?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It is the same amount we've received in the past.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments, committee members first? Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, sir. QRT is a really important program. I think, we continue to see opioid overdoses in the community. Are there any details available maybe on, just some statistics from the program from 2021? They don't need to be immediately available, but the number of people served and the number of shifts and that kind of thing.
Yes, we reported this in the grant application. The grant application period runs from May 1st through the end of April. So this year we had a reduction in the number of deaths overall, which is what the goal of the program was. But the percentage of overdoses that resulted in deaths is up. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting as we went through the research for this year's grant was the finding, and this is something that folks with, I believe, Summit County Public Health are doing those studies. But what we're seeing is it takes time for people to come to the resources that they need. So while we might go out to their house this week, and offer those services and offer help, it takes time for them to get around to it. And so in a lot of cases, it's 3 years down the road before we can really capture them and get them to come to services and get over that addiction. So this is paying dividends. It just takes time to see it, but it's a very worthwhile program we'd like to continue.
Thank you, Captain, and yes, agree with you. It's a great example of collaboration and a great program. Would it be possible to get a copy of the grant application?
We can do that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other council members? All right, what's your pleasure on this, Captain?
We're okay with consent on this.
Consent? All right. Go ahead, Malik.
I'd make a motion for suspension of the rules with a favorable report.
Second.
All right. We have a motion for suspension of the rules and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, we'll pass that this evening. All right. Next piece, ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts without publicly advertising for bids with Akron Enterprises, Inc., Incorporated, for body-worn camera equipment, licensing, data storage, and other services, and declare emergency. Captain?
Yes, we are asking for this piece of legislation so that we can go ahead with the renewal of our contract. Our contracts with Axon have been traditionally 5 years, and then we had some extension time on that first contract. So first contract was for 5 years. We extended it a couple of times on a one-year basis because it benefited the city financially. We're now at the end of that. This contract will actually combine all of our camera contracts into one at very favorable terms over the next 5 years for a total of $1.4 million over that time frame. And this is also going to allow us, once we have this master agreement approved, to go ahead with some testing and an evaluation of dash cams as well.
Good, I appreciate that, thanks. Any questions or comments? Committee members first. Councilwoman Mosley.
Thank you, Councilman Kamer. Will this contract, is it for the current cameras, body-worn cameras we have, or is it to add more onto that already inventory?
Yes, ma'am. This is just covering what we have currently in the program. So right now we have body cameras on all of our patrol people, traffic, our NRTs. There actually are, and that's officers and sergeants, there actually are a handful of lieutenants and a handful of detectives that voluntarily ask for cameras, and as long as we have them available, we allow that. But the focus of this one is just our uniformed personnel. We do have a grant in to expand the program for extra jobs. That's something separate and apart that we'll talk about another time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other questions or comments? Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Captain. How many cameras do we currently have?
Yeah, right now the number is 286.
Okay.
Those are the ones that are in stock. That includes, and it varies from day to day, right around 15 to 20 that are spares in case something goes wrong, or they're in the process of being fixed, which is part of the contract as well. We send them back, they provide us with a new one that works.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. What was your pleasure on this, Captain?
On this one, I would ask for a suspension of the rules.
Motion for suspension of the rules with a favorable report.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. And to our final piece, it's a resolution offered by my colleague, Councilman Malik. Resolution expressing support for Ohio House Bill 545, which would facilitate the creation and peer support programs for first responders and law enforcement, expressing Akron City Council support for the funding, mental health resources for safety forces and all City of Akron employees, and declaring an emergency. Councilman, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to bring this before council. It's an issue that I've been aware of since I started on council, but certainly, predates that. Many of us are aware of the work of the Safety Forces Support Center to try to provide support to safety forces, both fire and police and EMS, in terms of the difficult things that they experience on a day-to-day job. And one of the things that happens is when there is a specific crisis, right? Officers witness someone die in front of them, or something like some kind of critical incident like that. We have a setup where trained professionals help debrief that situation and provide any kind of mental health supports that are needed. But one of the gaps that we see is in terms of outside of that, in terms of regular day-to-day life. So when an officer's finish their shift, maybe they didn't witness something critical, but they want to just confide in another officer and get some advice and get a perspective from someone who's trained and who can provide that support. The issue that we've been running into for several years, to my understanding, is related to confidentiality, right? Because there is a concern that those communications may not be privileged and could be brought up in a court case, or someone could be subpoenaed to testify as to the content of those decisions. So that's what this bill that's in the Ohio State House seeks to resolve, creating a confidentiality privilege for trained peer support programs within safety forces. So it has, to my understanding, passed unanimously from the Ohio House. It is currently going before the Ohio Senate. So, to me, this is a common sense thing that we should support and send a message down to Columbus that we'd like, their approval so we can get something like this up and running. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any questions or comments, committee members? Other council members? Councilman, I just have one question. I know in the first line it does say safety forces and all City of Akron employees. Do you know what that entails?
Sure. I was just, in drafting it, wanted to convey our support as council for providing mental health resources for all employees, right? This is specific, these programs would be specific to safety forces because of kind of the unique experiences that they deal with on a day-to-day basis as first responders. But certainly we want to, I know the administration is very thoughtful about, we're providing support to all city employees.
Okay. So the House bill basically just focuses on safety forces, dispatchers, et cetera.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Got you. All right, thanks. Any other questions or comments? Councilwoman Amobian?
Yes, I'm not familiar with this 545, but are we talking about individuals who have lived experiences, being a part of the outreach force here? I know that the quick responders, the QRT that we have, we do utilize peers with that. Is that what you're talking about here, Councilman?
I think this is a little bit different. I think, peer support groups are usually involve, officers or other staff that are trained to help counsel and help provide, perspective and advice to their colleagues. But, I think one of the important pieces here is that often you want to, certainly we have employee assistance programs and other existing programs that are important, but sometimes, an officer wants to speak with someone similarly situated. And so, a lieutenant may want to speak to another lieutenant. And so, certainly this would deal with people who are trained and who are, certified, I believe. But it is a little bit different from the QRT.
So you're talking about law enforcement peers?
Yes, I mean, it would apply to, fire and EMS as well, but safety forces and first responders.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other questions or comments? What's your pleasure, Councilman?
Well, it's up to this committee. I think this is pretty straightforward, but, if folks would like to take a week so that we could, review the legislation, that's fine with me, or we could pass it today, either way.
Okay. I'll ask one of my colleagues to make a motion.
Motion for consent.
Oh, what'd she say? I'm sorry.
Consent.
Oh, consent?
Sorry.
We have a motion for consent.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor for consent agenda?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you, everyone. That's our 4 pieces. We are adjourned.
Our next committee meeting of the day is Public Utilities and Green Committee. The committee members are Freeman, McKittrick, Connor, Mosley, and Holland. We do have all committee members present. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. We'll call the committee meeting to order, and for the sake of us who are remote here, we'll ask you to get very close to your microphones as you're speaking today. Thank you. So I do need a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, very good. We have one ordinance coming here before us today. It's an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service, after publicly advertising for bids, to enter into a contract or contracts for the replacement and installation of water mains owned and operated by the City of Akron as a part of the University of Akron Water Main Rehabilitation Program, and declaring an emergency. And I believe we'll come to you, Mr. Lovell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. Yes, Akron U is going through an upgrade on their campus, and by doing this, we are going to be proactive and replace the water main. These water mains in this infrastructure are over 100 years old, so we're going to be upgrading some 12-inch and some 30-inch water mains. It's about 3,000 feet of water main that will be, it's the main transmission main from downtown through the university. So with that, I will take any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions from either the committee members or anyone else that is currently online in the meeting here? All right, I'm not seeing any hands. I'm not seeing. If you have a question, please speak up and we'll acknowledge you. Okay. Am I missing anyone?
Nothing here in chambers.
Okay, very good. All right, what would be your pleasure level?
Consent's fine, sir.
Okay, so can I have a motion for consent, please?
Motion
So
for consent.
moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, very good. We'll see that that item is placed on the consent agenda, and I believe that's all we have coming before us today, and we will adjourn at 3:29. Thank you.
Our next committee meeting of the day is the Budget and Finance Committee. Those members are Freeman, Amobian, Malik, Baylor, and Lombardo. We do have all committee members present. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. We'll call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. And we have several items come before us. Michelle, I'm operating off of a new legislation draft. We do have 6 new items, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Mr. Chair, you want to approve the minutes?
Okay, thank you. Yes, motion to approve the minutes. Thank you, Ms. Mobian.
So move.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, please let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good, thank you. Our first ordinance is an ordinance accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission of Summit County and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the Summit County Fiscal Officer and declaring an emergency.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. This is Cheryl Bryson, Treasurer for the City of Akron. Council members, Madam President. This is the annual piece of legislation that we submit approving the 10.5 inside mills that's collected for the City of Akron as part of the assessed valuation on properties in the City of Akron.
Okay, thank you. I know this comes before us annually. Are there any questions or comments from any council members, any committee members? If so, please just go ahead and speak up. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Would this be okay on consent agenda?
That would be great. Thank you.
Motion for consent.
Thank you. We have a motion for consent and a second. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you. We'll see that that item is placed on the consent agenda. Next, we have a resolution requesting that the Summit County Fiscal Officer make an advance payment of tax funds for tax year 2022 payable in 2023 to the City of Akron Treasury Division and declaring an emergency.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair. This, again, is an annual piece that we ask for your consideration. This allows us to actually get advancements on the semi-annual payments that we would receive and allows us to have cash flow ahead of that semi-annual payment. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Questions or comments from the committee or any other members of City Council? Okay. Consent would be okay on this as well, Ms. Bryson?
Yes, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion for consent.
So moved.
Second.
And a second. All in favor, please let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next, we have an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of notes of the city in the maximum principal not to exceed $5,100,000 to retire the city's $5 million taxable economic development revenue notes, Series 2021 AES System Improvement Projects, previously issued under Section 13 of Article 8 of the Constitution of the State of Ohio and Chapter 165 of the Ohio Revised Code and declaring an emergency.
Again, thank you. These notes were approved by you, as it mentions, in 2021 for improvements at the AES plant. And based on current market conditions, as opposed to us taking those to permanent financing, we believe it to be advantageous to issue those again as a one-year note until next year. And we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
I think he's frozen. Go ahead. Go ahead, Councilman Mallett.
Sure. So thank you, Ms. Bryson. So this we did the same thing last year, right? This is money that was originally borrowed in, I think, 2014, 2015.
No, actually, these were originally issued in 20. We had issued a $5 million note to make improvements at AES.
Okay.
And that was actually an external issue with PNC. Last year, we rolled them internally because they had not expended all the funds.
Okay.
This year, as opposed to taking them to permanent financing based on the rates, we believe it's just best to roll them another year.
And so next year, you would
Until next
anticipate taking them to permanent financing?
Correct, and perhaps new monies as well, but there are no new monies attached to this issue.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are you back live, Mr. Chair?
I hope I am. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, were there any other questions or comments? Okay, very good. Ms. Bryson, would consent be okay, or do we need this now?
No, consent would be fine, thank you.
Okay, very good.
Motion for consent?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for consent. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Next, we have an ordinance authorizing the issuance of a bond of the city in a principal amount of not to exceed $3 million for sale to the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund of the state of Ohio to finance the cost of improvements to the city's wastewater system, pledging certain revenues from the city's wastewater system on a subordinated business to secure the payment of the principal of and interest on the bond, and authorizing the execution and delivery of the bond, the trust agreement and other documents, and the taking of other actions related to the issuance and sale of the bond, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Chair, that was actually number 5 that you read.
Right.
Oh, okay. Can we go ahead and take them out of order?
Yeah.
Can,
Sure, yes. Let's go with 5, and then we'll go back to 4.
okay, very good. Thank you. Apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of committee. This piece of legislation is for the Memorial Conveyance Project, which we refer to as CSO, separation of RAC 26. This originally, when we brought this to you before, this was part of the Second Amendment. There was supposed to be a storage basin behind the nursing home on Hickory Street. We replaced this with this conveyance project. So we're removing the stormwater out of this system, putting a new storm sewer down Hickory Street, and then the new sanitary will run down behind the nursing home, under the towpath trail, and connect into the main outfall sewer. So this bond legislation is for that project.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Questions or comments?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Luddle. This project is more or less complete, right?
We have done part of it.
Okay.
It's under construction currently.
Okay.
So they're down there now working on it.
Okay.
So it needs to be done by the end of the year, this project, and we will meet that deadline.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malley. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Luddle, consent is okay?
That's fine, sir.
Okay. Can I have a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
Second.
Go ahead. Second.
Okay. We have many motions. We have a motion and consent for consent agenda and a second. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Any opposed? Okay. Now, Michelle, I believe I need to jump up to number 4. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Number 4, item number 4. Taking this out of order a bit here because of my own error. This is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of a bond of the city in a principal amount not to exceed $5,500,000 for sale to the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund of the state of Ohio to finance the cost of improvements to the city's wastewater system, pledging certain revenues from the city's wastewater system on a subordinated basis to secure the payment of the principal of and interest on the bond, and authorizing the execution and delivery of the bond, the trust agreement and other documents, and taking of other actions related to the issuance and sale of the bond, and declaring an emergency.
Now, I have 8.5 now. Was that changed?
No, it's 8.5.
How much is it?
I have 8.5.
Yeah, that's what I have.
8.5 is correct.
I'm sorry for the confusion.
I'm reading off of a draft, and mine reads 5.5.
I'm sorry for the confusion. There was an updated piece sent this morning that specifies it's 8.5.
Okay, do I need to read that in or reread the ordinance?
No, that's okay.
Okay, just
As long as everyone's
I'm
aware.
operating off of a draft of the legislation, and this legislation is 8.5, not 5.5. So, Mr. Little, we'll continue with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. Unfortunately, we had to make an amendment this morning to this legislation. There were some sections of sewer that's going to be added to this project and the increased cost. So that's why it is $8.5 million. What we're going to do here is, in this project, we are going to line what we call the lower north side interceptor. So basically, it's on Peck Road underneath the high-level bridge, and this is the sewer that's going to be part of where the new tunnel will connect into. So it's about 3,300 feet of sewer that will be, 6,400 feet of sewer that will be lining. So all the way from the dead end of Peck Road, all the way down Peck Road, underneath Cauga Street, all the way over and across the river to tie into the main outfall sewer. So this sewer, it starts out as 36-inch, 39-inch, and it goes up to a 48-inch brick sewer, which is well over 100 years old, and this will extend the life of this sewer at least for another 50 years.
Very good, and that is that's the cost for the additional $3 million?
Some of the manholes that we're adding and some of the extra costs, yes. That's why it went up by $3 million.
Okay, thank you. Entertain questions from the committee or other council members?
Mr. Chair? Yep, thank you. Mr. Little, I know in the UCR it mentions that, in the absence of this, there's a concern that, there could be instability within the sewer system in the creation of the, permanent tunnel as part of the consent decree. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
I think more of it is, sir, is, most of that is all parkland that we own. Mm-hmm. But when we remove the gorge dam, a lot of the sediment is going to go directly right over top of this sewer. So that's what we're concerned about, is stabilizing that and increasing the structure of that sewer when all that sediment is placed.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Once again, Mr. Lovell, would consent be okay for this?
Yes, sir.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for consent. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, very good. Finally, we have an ordinance authorizing the issuance of a bond of the city in a principal amount not to exceed $12 million for sale to the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund of the state of Ohio, finance the cost of improvements to the city's wastewater system, pledging certain revenues from the city's wastewater system on a subordinated basis to secure the payment of the principal of and interest on the bond, and authorizing the execution and delivery of the bond, the trust agreement, and other documents, and the taking of other actions related to the issuance and sale of the bond and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. This bond issuance is for our small diameter lining throughout the city. As you know, we TV and clean 1/5 of our sewer system every year. And what we determine is once we do that TV and cleaning, the critical defects, we have to either excavate and replace that pipe, or what we have found over the years is lining these pipes is a lot less intrusive, and it's a lot less expense to do that. So one of the bigger projects that we are going to be doing is lining the sewer all the way through Lock 3 as part of the Lock 3 project. That sewer that runs through Lock 3, there again, it's close to 100 years old. So before we do all that work at Lock 3, we want to rehabilitate that sewer so we don't have to go back in, obviously, after we do all that work. But There is, we can get you a list if you're interested of all these segments throughout the city that we will be lining. Some are under right-of-ways. I don't believe this year we have any under the expressways, but in previous years we had sewers that actually run under, whether it's Route 8 or 76, and we lime those sewers. So with that, consent would be fine on this, sir.
And one question, Mr. Law, is this the same method that was used out at Mud Run for lining those sewers?
Yeah, exactly the same. Everything there off of those sewers, off of East Avenue, 31st Street, California, Louisiana, Battles Avenue, same exact thing, sir.
Yeah, and just for the sake of our other committee members, that method saved a ton of excavation and was very successful out in that stretch there, so we appreciate that. So any questions or comments from committee members or any other council members?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Yes. If we could get that list of the segments, we'd
Sure.
appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Okay, very good. All right. Consent, you said would be fine on this, so we'll be looking for that list. Can we have a motion for consent?
Motion for consent. Second.
Okay, a motion and a second has been made. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Anyone opposed? All right. Michelle, I think that's all we have. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct.
I think he's frozen, so we'll consider ourselves adjourned.
On this end,
Well, he's on. Is that the last committee meeting?
Yes, that is the last committee meeting of the day. Council will meet at 7 p.m. tonight. Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you, Archer. Thank you.